Now we're starting off this list a little weird and talking about Hawkeye. Clint Barton is essentially just a regular human man, but despite that, he is considered a power level 4 according to Nick Fury's intel. This is due to his incredible level of skill and ability. Hawkeye is a master of archery in the use of regular bows, longbows, compound bows, and crossbows, with basically perfect accuracy, able to fire multiple arrows at a single target in a few seconds, hitting multiple targets in a few quick strokes, and directly hitting small targets in the greatest of distances, but he also has near perfect precision with any aimed or thrown weapon. He is at the peak level of human eyesight possible. He is in peak athletic human condition with peak strength, endurance, and reflexes. He is an expert acrobat, tactician, and master martial artist. And it's seemingly all from just practice and training really hard. To show you how ridiculous this is, in Avengers Volume 3 number 14, Hawkeye was cornered by about 17 marksmen and he took them all down without taking a single life. In Hawkeye Volume 4 number 1, Clint ran into a wanted criminal in a bar and he took him down completely silently by, get this, fracturing his neck with a deck of cards. And last but not least, you know that Winter Soldier scene from the MCU with Captain America taking out all those dudes in an elevator? Hawkeye did the same thing in Volume 2 number 3 of his own comic, and that was way before Cap, who is a super soldier, I will remind you, got the credit. The mutant and original X-Man, Forget-Me-Not, might be a case of people judging a book by its cover, because he doesn't really look too menacing if we're being honest. And to be fair, his powers do also sound pretty lame at face value. Basically, this mutant can't be remembered by anyone, and sometimes anything he meets as soon as he's out of sight. And as sad as this must be for him in his personal life, Forget-Me-Not can use this power to his advantage in huge ways in the right circumstances. In one case, he's even able to dupe all of X-Force when the team has to form an elaborate plan just to track him down. They're only able to finally catch him by having Dr. Nemesis record himself explaining to the team the existence of Forget-Me-Not as they search for him. The only caveat to this whole tedious process is that the maintenance bots, along with, I'm assuming, any computer automated system, can actually remember Forget-Me-Not if it doesn't get glitched out, which sort of weakens the potential of his powers. But again, don't be fooled. You know when the X-Men seem to just miraculously figure out a secret or a previously unknown way to defeat an almost unbeatable opponent? 90% of the time, that's just Forget-Me-Not, and the X-Men just forget him, but not the information that he gives to them. Now, Nina Thurman is a mutant weapons expert and mercenary under the name Domino. She was introduced in the early 90s as a member of X-Force. Now, Domino is the survivor of a bunch of unethical scientists who are trying to create the perfect weapon. It's the tale as old as time, really, but this means Domino has all the talents and skills you would expect of an expert mercenary or secret agent. But we're here to talk about powers, and Domino's are unique to say the least. Domino has probability manipulation powers, meaning she's almost always lucky. She exudes at all times a subconsciously activated field that alters the probability of occurrences in her line of sight into her favor. This means that whenever she is stressed, excited, or focused on something, things will probably go well for her and quite poorly for her opponents. Now, there is a caveat to this. She needs to actively be trying to help herself for her powers to work. So, like, if debris is falling from the sky and was about to hit her in the head, she would still be hurt if she stood still. However, if she tried to avoid them, she would move perfectly to avoid each and every piece about to hit her. Now, the full potential of Domino's abilities hasn't actually been fully realized as of yet, and Marvel has a knack for updating powers whenever they want, but with an ability to be lucky, there's only a finite amount of things you cannot do. Now, while the powers of Domino are still fresh in your minds, this is a perfect opportunity to talk about Iska the Unbeaten. Iska also has a form of limited psychokinesis, which is probability manipulation, or known as the power of luck, which is probably one of the most unexplainable powers because we can't even really say that luck is for sure a real thing. But Iska takes it one step further than Domino into ridiculousness with the power of being literally unable to lose. Iska has the power to always win, no matter what. Whether that is in individual one-on-one contests, votes, wagers, or even just larger battles where she's a member of a group. In contests of skill, her powers might give her the talent she needs to win, or she might just win through improbable circumstances, quote unquote. In larger battles or even wars, her powers detect the probability of both sides winning and have literally led her to defect from the losing side and join the winning side, meaning she still personally wins. It's not that we don't necessarily understand it. I mean, I don't understand it. It's just that it can't even properly be explained without sounding just ridiculous. I love her though. I love that character.
Number 10, Detective Chimp. Detective Chimp might just be a chimp who also isn't necessarily known for his fighting prowess and strength, but he's also an extremely intelligent chimp who is considered to be one of the greatest detectives Earth actually has. Not only that, but he's also been tied to the realm of mysticism after he gained the Sword of Night. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to let us know that you love us by clicking that like button. Seriously, it feeds the algorithm. Feed the algorithm. Number 9, Forge. Forge is kinda squishy in comparison to some other physically tougher and more durable heroes out there, which is why he makes our cut here. And he's not particularly well known for his fighting prowess, but he is well known for making cool stuff, especially cool weapons, and because of that, he is actually extremely useful. Many also forget that Forge has experience with shamanism and not only has a mutant origin, but an origin that is also attached to the world of magic and mysticism, which honestly is pretty cool. However, for those who want to argue that Forge could march in there alongside someone like Cyclops, I think he'd actually prefer to outfit someone like Cyclops to march into action in his stead, but super souped up so that Cyc alone could stand in for a whole small army of heroes, and of course, Forge himself. Be like, I'll just make you super cool, you go in there, and then it's basically like there's two of us because you're gonna be that cool. Number 8, Fury. This version of Fury we're focusing on here is mainly known by the name of Lita Hall. This version of the character had her origin changed following the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths. Instead of being Diana Prince, Wonder Woman, and Steve Trevor's daughter, she would become known as the daughter of Helena Cosmatos, also Fury, who was raised instead by Admiral Derek Trevor and Miss America, aka Joan Dale Trevor. In the Sandman universe, she was once the partner of Hector Hall, and the two are going to have a child together when Hector tragically dies. While dead in the real world, Hector's consciousness becomes suspended in a pocket of the Dreaming, with Brute and Glob turning him into their new Sandman after Dream's imprisonment. Lita is visited by Hector in her dreams and eventually chooses to stay with him there, but because their child is conceived in the Dreaming, he ends up being claimed by the Dream Lord Morpheus once he himself returns. He forces Hector's spirit to move on and explains that one day he will come for Lita's child, who belongs to the Dreaming. Despite her Amazonian-like abilities, Lita can be seen as weak in the traditional superhero sense, as she doesn't act as a hero in Neil Gaiman's Sandman series, and instead attempts to pursue a simple, normal life with her son. However, she gets insane anxiety when it comes to being separated from him at any moment because of Dream's threat to one day claim him. Number 7, Dazzler. Dazzler is here not because of how weak she seems, but because of how truly incredible her powers are. The only thing that really makes her seemingly useless is the fact that Alison Blair typically prefers to use her powers for her performances as opposed to being, you know, the team leader for the X-Men, which honestly, she easily could be, and actually has been in regards to multiversal teams that exist. She's played the role of leader before, both with her band and with her fellow mutant heroes, but not for the main X-Men team. No, no, no. Dazzler has powers that have been described before to be potentially unlimited in terms of just how much damage she could do. She can transmute sound into light, and while her light shows in her concerts might seem kinda tame, she has also used her power set to defeat and defend against heavy hitters like Ulysses Claw, who she permanently defeated, Enchantress, and the Hulk. Number 6, Witchfire. I think Witchfire is a super cool hero. She not only looks cool, but she also is a magical hero, one of the most powerful kinds out there if you ask me. One of them. Not the only one, but definitely one of my tops. But still, among those who are gifted with magic, Witchfire's Rebecca Carstairs usually ends up being regarded as lower on the totem pole. I'm sure there are actually many of you out there who aren't even familiar with this character. And to show how tragically weak she is, shortly after her first appearance in the Prime Earth continuity, she's permanently defeated, with her soul ending up being trapped after the complete destruction of her physical body. Pretty tragic, really, because I just feel like she's so cool. How could you do her like that? Number 5. Cypher. Cypher I'd like to rank a little bit lower on this list because calling him weak feels kind of unfair considering how integral he's been lately in regards to helping kickstart Krakoa, especially in the comics. But Cypher is still one of those characters that people attribute as being weak because of his power set, and so for that reason I'm still gonna count him here. But of course his powers actually happen to be some of the most useful in the comics. It's kind of like a misunderstanding, especially when we consider that they also apply to Cypher being able to communicate with tech and using his ability to understand and communicate in all kinds of languages to become a skilled fighter, which has been interpreted by certain writers as its own language, so Cypher can also be great at fighting. However, not all writers seem to be able to agree on this point, because some people have also seemingly forgot that Cypher is supposed to be really great at fighting. Number 4. Tracy 13. Tracy 13 is a magic user who isn't as well known as others like Zatanna, John Constantine, or Dr. Fate from DC Comics. And in that regard, considering she hasn't had as much of a chance to prove herself, she could be considered weak. That being said, she still is a magic user and one who is the daughter of both a magical skeptic and a powerful sorceress, meaning that she possesses both the knowledge of when to be doubtful about someone's prowess and skills and the natural aptitude to perform magic herself, learning from her mother before her mother passed away. In the Prime Earth continuity, the type of magic that Tracy uses is actually known as urban magic, which allows her to fuel her abilities through the power and spirit of sprawling and built up cities. Personally, I also think that's just like a super cool niche magic thing, urban magic. Number 3, Dupe. Unsurprisingly, yes, a lot of seemingly weak heroes who actually happen to have pretty impressive powers come from the mutant camp of Marvel Comics. Although I don't know if it's ever actually been cemented exactly what Dupe is at all, whether that be mutant or something else entirely. Maybe an alien, who knows. However, Dupe has definitely found a home with the mutants, so I think we'd still consider him to be an honorary mutant at the very least if we wanted. Dupe has to be one of the weirdest characters of all time, especially when it comes to his storylines. Dupe is also weirdly romantic for a floating green alien language speaking creature that was possibly created as a result of government experimentation. Kinda looks like a jelly bean. Yet also somehow he has a mother. Dupe is a ridiculous character, but when he needs to, he seems to be able to exhibit almost any superpower one could think of. Number 2, Booster Gold. Booster Gold could be considered weak because his powers aren't even really powers that he was born with or incurred from a wacky lab accident gone wrong or worked really hard to earn abilities, but instead are fueled by technology that he stole in the future, which is where, or rather when, he's from. The future. He used tech to travel to the past and with his knowledge of the past as well, aimed to become a hero in that time period. There, Booster used his tech as well as his knowledge from the future to try and become a hero. And well, he succeeded! Hooray! However, just because Booster can do things like time travel doesn't mean he's always the best at heroics. Case in point, the time he tried to give a gift to Batman and Catwoman in honor of their wedding. His gift was to travel back in time and prevent Bruce's parents from being lost to him all those years ago. But in so doing, this also prevented Bruce and Selena from ever getting together and also caused, well, a lot of other problems. I mean, Batman wouldn't be Batman without that loss, right? Potentially. Yes, actually, I think that story confirmed that. Number 1, Squirrel Girl. Squirrel Girl is one of my all-time favorite heroes, even if some out there consider her to be weak sauce. Not me though, I see her true strength, but I can't ignore the fact that on paper, her powers, her mutation, well, it all does sound pretty ridiculous. And she should, by all intents and purposes, not be as OP as we know her to be. However, that being said, I feel like we need to acknowledge the fact that Doreen's abilities, or more specifically, her people skills, are honestly insanely powerful. Squirrel Girl has the ability to befriend pretty much anyone, no matter their alignment. And she is really, and I mean really, good at helping convince criminals to call it quits, either for the day or honestly, for the rest of their entire lives. You know the X-Men, sure. You know mutants, probably a lot of them, yeah. But do you know about all the mutations they have? Maybe not. Devil Dinosaur comes from the prehistoric past of Earth 78411. Most people think of him as just a devil beast from Dinosaur World, and yeah, he is that. But did you know that he is also a mutant? Yep, his mutant gene activated after a traumatic experience with fire. Fortunately, he was saved from those who would harm him by Moon Boy, who befriended the beast. Devil Dinosaur's skin changed to red as a result of his mutation, making him a giant bright red dinosaur. Really stands out. Which honestly kinda makes me think of Clifford the big red dog. I wonder if Clifford is also secretly a mutant with a secret mutation. He has like bright red fur. So strange. Devil Dinosaur was partnered with Moon Boy for quite some time until Moon Boy's death, wherein a new character was introduced to work alongside Devil Dinosaur, a girl with inhuman genes known as Lunella Lafayette, or Moon Girl. We love Lunella. I love DD too. He's also a really great card in Marvel Snap, by the way, especially if you pair him with Moon Girl. It's one of my favorite combos, even to this day. I don't know what's more frightening, the fact that Jean can basically manipulate people's dreams and nightmares through the villain Nightmare, or the threat she gave Nightmare after defeating him in the comics, where she threatened to destroy him at an atomic level. Yikes. Either way you slice it though, when it comes to nightmares that have been created by the god of nightmares himself, Jean is actually the one who would really call the shots between them when they're pitted against one another. I know you'd think Nightmare would come out on top here, but Jean is just that powerful. She could not only use him to take control of others' dreams the world over, but of course could also just take control of those dreams from Nightmare himself, and even match him, or really even beat him in his own realm, which is pretty wild. Chamber is a weird character, but also a beloved character. Like many weirdos that I love to talk about, Chamber is of course also a mutant. His name is Jonathan Starsmore, and while he may actually have the potential to be considered Omega level, that doesn't make his powers any less weird, thank goodness. His power relates to the fact that he's actually made of pure psionic energy. Now while many people know that Jono is psionic, because you know he's always talking telepathically, I don't think many folks actually think about like why his powers manifesting caused him to lose his jaw. I mean, I'm sure the hardcore Jono fans know all about this, but for those of you that are a casual Chamber fan, I'm gonna get into it. When his powers first manifested, they blew a massive hole in his chest and his face. While many people would be immensely harmed or even killed by such an occurrence, Chamber was not. As a result, Jono no longer needs to breathe, eat, or drink, and his blood does not even course through his veins. It doesn't need to do that to keep him alive. Yeah, as such he is typically seen with a scarf or some other clothing covering the lower half of his face, and he communicates telepathically as, you know, he can no longer talk since he has no jaw. Also he's made of psionic energy, so he's a very powerful psionic mutant. By far one of the strangest, yet kinda in a weird way most OP characters of all time from Marvel has to be Duke. Okay, so he's at the very least the most strange. And now we have his evil counterpart, Pood in Excellent, who might somehow be weirder. Oh boy. Dupe is pretty powerful because he has some fourth wall shattering level of awareness, and he's able to actually move between panels in comics, existing not just within the panels of the page, but also moving into the borders and margins as well, able to exist outside of the panels that we're used to reading, which I think is pretty wild. I mean, not many other characters can do that, never mind mutants. Granted, we don't really know what Dupe is, or you know, if he's really a mutant, but he definitely hangs out with the X-Men a lot, and I feel like he's so weird, I just would believe he is a mutant in some way in his origin. Though at this point in time, there's no definitive origin for the character yet, just to be fully transparent here. He's also demonstrated some powerful magical abilities too, as well as super strength, speed, durability, and even the power to resurrect. Without the help of the Five no less, he can just do that by himself, so he's got a lot of powers that I feel like not a lot of people think about. The Love Eyes is one of my favorites. Never forget Madeline Pryor's awesome telekinetic lasso. What an awesome and totally bizarre weapon for a goblin queen to wield. Maybe we can call it a telekinetic whip instead. That seems more fitting based on Maddie's kinda generally crazy and definitely vicious and vengeful disposition. Madeline Pryor as the Goblin Queen used this lasso to wrangle, get this, Jean Grey. That's right, her lasso was powerful enough to wrangle Jean, who herself is considered, now at least, an Omega level mutant in both psionic areas of power. What's more, Maddie's psionic whip was so powerful, it also like basically just rendered Jean powerless when they were having their fight. So yeah, I feel like if you can use any kind of lasso to render Jean Grey powerless, that's impressive. Why doesn't she use it more often? She should bring it back. I want to see the lasso again. Let's bring it back. Training with Doctor Strange made magic even more powerful. She already has all the knowledge imparted to her by Alternate Storm and of course Belasco and all his magical texts, so adding in the teaching of Doctor Strange has made her an insane level of powerful when it comes to her magical abilities. At one point she used her knowledge to turn herself and a group of other supers, including mutants and some Guardians of the Galaxy members, invisible. Yeah, and a gambit to buy time when her teleportation powers just couldn't cut it. It's not really like a mutant power, but it is a power that a mutant has. So, see what I did there? There's something about people being in near-death experiences that seemingly allow them to evolve in some way and survive. Mask is another one of the mutants that has experienced that. Mask was inherently more of a villain in the comics and also a Morlock. However, being a Morlock wasn't what made him evil. What made him evil was kind of his outlook on life. His mutant powers allowed him to alter the appearance of others, basically turning him into one of the world's most powerful plastic surgeons of all time. But at the same time, Mask was considered himself to be hideous, hence why he hid in the underground tunnels of New York with the Morlocks and, was a Morlock, because that's kind of their whole thing. And his powers did not work on his own physical appearance, tragically. That is until he was nearly killed by Shatterstar. Now, to survive, he had to actually move his organs around, so this gave him the power to manipulate his appearance. He leveled up. He gained what we would call a secondary mutation. For a while, he also used his powers to appear as Marilyn Monroe while leading the Morlocks. Although now Mask has seemingly gotten over his obsession with beauty and usually chooses to just appear as he is. Either that or people forgot that this power existed, but I'm gonna go with the route of, Mask just loves himself now, because I like that story for him. Moira was usually known as more of an ally to the X-Men for many years, and none of us would have ever suspected that she had powers at all. She has been known as a mutant ally throughout many comics, often Charles Xavier's ill-fated lover, and if you don't see her as being a major player in the comics, let me just remind you that she was the one who figured out how to cure the legacy virus, and I honestly think that elevated her even to a superhero status if we're talking about it. We found out Moira McTaggart was a mutant recently in modern comics during the House of X series. We learned that she had done more than just die in the comics. We learned that her powers allowed her to actually be reborn, but not in a traditional sense of superpowers. This isn't a healing factor or a resurrection. Her powers actually allow her to relive her life again. Yeah, so it's kind of like a reincarnation. From birth to death, starting in the womb. So she's living the same years, but she can use her actions to alter history, making her an odd but surprisingly powerful mutant. But not everyone knows about Moira McTaggart and her powers, so there you go. This is less of a power, this next one, and more of like just a really interesting fact about a power, but I didn't know this myself initially and I was surprised by it somewhat, so I figured I would just share it with you and count it as a point on this list. Now we all know that Jean is one of the preferred hosts, if not I would say the preferred host for the Phoenix Force, but did you know that the all-powerful cosmic entity was actually holding Jean back? Yeah, apparently that's right. Jean has stated before that she actually became aware after the Phoenix Force left her that it was actually causing her to hold back her abilities for fear of the Phoenix taking a hold of her and possessing her. So while many like to say that Jean has only ever been extremely powerful when she's merged with the Phoenix, like that's Jean at her most powerful, it turns out that it's probably just the opposite, because she literally fought to hold herself back, which honestly to me makes some sense. Saying Jean isn't actually powerful and that it's like all the Phoenix has always just felt like kind of a cop-out to me, considering that it's her own power and empathy that the Phoenix was seemingly attracted to in the first place. Like that's why she's the ideal host, so to me that makes sense. But that also means some crazy stuff. That means like Jean could destroy maybe the multiverse herself, you know what I mean? Because Phoenix can destroy planets, so. I always forget about Kid Omega's secondary mutation because it very rarely comes up in the comics, and I feel like it's also therefore a power that a lot of people are gonna forget. Now I usually probably forget about it because Quentin Quire no longer really finds it interesting. At least, that's the canon reason that we're given for why we really never see it anymore. I personally think it sounds super interesting and I'm surprised that he's bored of it. However, this is Quentin, so maybe I shouldn't be so surprised. Quentin Quire is a bit of an oddball. He's often unimpressed as well by some of the coolest stuff. He's very like, ugh, whatever, I'm over it. Or at least, he presents himself this way often. Kid Omega's power that I'm about to talk about here is that he has a non-corporeal form, which when accessed also speeds up his consciousness and actually allows him as a telepath to reach out and connect with all sentient beings. Yeah, basically like all of Earth he could just connect with. He can think at the speed of light while in this form, but then again, even when Quire isn't in it, he's known for being one of the fastest thinkers and one of the smartest psionics on the planet.
When it comes to superhero powers, I'm sure we could all list off a few for the mainstream folks. But what about those hidden powers that only pop up every once in a while? While I don't think I've read enough comics yet to know every single power for every single soup ever, I think I managed to wrangle some interesting info for y'all today. Question for you, what superhero ability are you absolutely positive that you're the only one that knows about it? Let me know in the comments and let's test my knowledge together. I thought I knew it all when it came to Superman, but I had my mind absolutely blown today. The Silver Age was a weird time for the Man of Steel. In addition to his usual superpowers of flight, super strength, invulnerability, heat vision, and super breath, writers often gave him a plethora of bizarre powers for individual stories. Whether it was using super muscular control to change his face's appearance, or using his super mind to telepathically control others, the pre-crisis Superman could seemingly do anything. You heard me right, I think it was in Action Comics issue 55 and various Golden Age stories, this guy couldn't just change the shape of his face, but in some cases, his entire body. In early adventures, he used to disguise himself as a disgraced sports player, an alien creature, all of which begs a pretty obvious question. Why on earth would he rely on a pair of nondescript glasses to hide his identity when he could just change his face? That's gonna stick with me. One of his most bizarre powers was the super kiss. Look folks, consent is a beautiful thing, and this is a weird gray area that launched my eyebrows into space faster than you could say kryptonite. Superman first used the super kiss in Action Comics issue 306, when he planted one on Lois Lane so hard it left her dizzy, flushed, and sweating profusely in the middle of the Daily Planet's Christmas party. While the rest of the planet's staff wondered why Lois couldn't suddenly walk, Clark was like, I'm going to congratulate myself on my secret tongue talents. His tonsil hockey talents were then showcased in Superman 2 when he planted a kiss on Lois to make her forget that they had shacked up in the Fortress of Solitude for a couple of weeks. Thankfully, this creepy superpower hasn't been seen since, because I'd be freaking out if it did. Has anyone ever counted how many versions of Wolverine's claws there have been over the years? They're one of the deadliest weapons in the Marvel Universe, and over the course of the character's history, he's seen nearly as many upgrades, alterations, alternate versions, and imitations of his claws as he changes his ever-shifting backstory. Of course, as the saying goes, some Wolverines are more deadly than others. The Fireclaw's version of Wolverine, imbued with the powers of Ghost Rider, not only looks amazing, but the idea of being slashed with those flaming claws is legitimately nightmarish. Considering the absolute havoc these claws have the potential to wreak, anyone coming face to face with this iteration of Wolverine is in major peril, including, a lot of folks. While the relative deadliness of some characters versus others can and should be debated, it is inarguable that a Wolverine with claws made of literal burning hellfire is one of the most dangerous creations in comic lore. Also, don't confuse them with his hawk claws, which is a version that glows white and is super hot, and takes the deadliness to an entirely unparalleled level. Aside from being able to cut through anything and everything, this Wolverine would need to do little more than gently poke the average person with even the tip of one of his claws, and it would result in their immediate death. In the same vein as the Fire Claws, the Hawk Claws have the edge because while the Fire Claws could possibly be difficult to be precise with, the Hawk Claws allow Wolverine to be as meticulous with his kills as ever. Ooh! While we're on the topic of fire, did anybody know that Luke Cage can actually make fire? So ever since the popular show came out on Netflix, we all love him. We first saw him in the Jessica Jones show, then he got his own show, and we were like, heck yes. We know he's superhumanly strong, and being injured doesn't really faze him, but he can create fire. So in one scene we see him walk out of his bar, on fire, he's unharmed, but what we don't see is him being able to rub his hands together, create enough friction, and make flames. Okay, imagine this. If Luke Cage holds, say, a pencil or a stick of wood, then by sliding the wood through his hands, the wood would catch fire because of friction. It's the same premise as cavemen making fire, or how Tom Hanks made it in the movie Castaway. Luke's ability to make fire could have aided him in several situations, or just like, could be fun for a campfire. Okay, either I fell asleep during the Thor movies, or I just somehow completely missed his pet goats? Curse you MCU for taking away an element of this character that would only serve to make him more of a Disney princess than he already is. Much of Thor's powers and arsenal comes straight out of Norse mythology. There's of course his weapon, and his much more infrequently used Belt of Strength that temporarily imbues him with even greater strength. Then there's his mystical chariot, which he can instantly summon to travel in between the 9 worlds. The chariot is unique because because it's driven by two large goats. Both of them have been shown to be extremely intelligent in various comics. Once Odin used the goats to summon reinforcements, while another time they saved Asgard's offspring when the city was attacked by invaders. One mythological aspect that hasn't carried over is that Thor often eats the goats before battle and then resurrects them the following day using Mjolnir. Okay, never mind that comment earlier about Disney princess energy. Eating your own pets is more Disney villain category and super weird. Oh, you know what? I know what I was thinking when I said Disney princess, and somebody forgot to tell me that Wonder Woman can talk to animals. Yes, I know, all her abilities are super cool, but talking to animals is so precious. And we've been robbed of that on screen. Technically, we saw a bit of this during Linda Carter's run as the DC heroine when she was shown speaking with a bird in one episode, and it's been a prominent Wonder Woman ability in the comics as well. So since she's a favorite of Zeus and other gods, these Greek gods granted Diana several superhuman abilities, and among them, the power to communicate with animals. So in the comics, you can see her speaking with like all types of creatures, tigers, lions, you name it. It's unlikely we'll get to see Wonder Woman speak to animals on the big screen anytime soon, since DC is restructuring at the moment, but despite being a rather obscure superpower among fans, it's so cool! Okay, let's move away from the big guys for a moment and focus on a personal favorite hero, or villain depending on your point of view, Homelander. So in the boys comics, his powers include heat vision, super strength, durability, flight, super hearing, and enhanced vocal cords. He also ages more slowly than a normal human thanks to Compound V. He also has X-ray vision, which enables him to see through anything except for stuff that has zinc, which, haha, I see that Superman nod. But in the show, I don't think we've really seen any reference to his enhanced vocal cords yet, or maybe I'm totally having a mind blank. Maybe that's something we can hope for in season 4, since it's almost here. Okay. Back to Marvel we go, with everything you forgot you knew about Captain America. Cap was the third Marvel superhero to be brought into the MCU. Iron Man and Thor both made very strong appearances, but the story of Steve Rogers becoming the big hero he is today was heartwarming to a lot of fans. There's a reason he's my favorite MCU soup, and the only one I've technically cosplayed. Through his trilogy and the Avengers films, we get to see a lot of his abilities like super strength, healing, speed, and more. One thing we don't get a lot of explanation about is his super heightened vision, which enables him to see further, sharper, and more quickly than normal humans. I feel like this really could have come in handy in more than a few instances, but I guess it was too much to translate on screen. One thing we see but don't really realize is that Cap can literally never get tired. He sleeps and everything, but he is totally immune to fatigue, which really helps you understand how he's so on the go during a fight. Yes, it's a little more subtle, but it's totally worth a mention in my opinion. Seeing as Spidey in the MCU is the third time in recent history that the webhead has made it to the big screen, I'm pretty sure people who aren't Marvel fans know the ins and outs of Spider-Man's most basic abilities. Heck, back when I knew next to nothing about superheroes, I could name a few of them. But today I learned about a handful that I'm surprised haven't been brought to the screen more. One thing we're very rarely shown is his ability to communicate with spiders, similar to how Ant-Man communicates with ants. Since he has all their climbing, webbing, and heightened senses, it adds up. I know arachnophobes everywhere just shuddered, and well, I'm right there with ya. Still weird that someone who is a spider in every other sense of the word hasn't really been seen talking to the creepy little buggers. Okay, how about in the comics, Peter actually has premonitions. As someone who is always fighting crime and evil, I'm betting this comes in handy for not being fired at or injured. I think he might have used this ability in Infinity War, which is why he seemed so panicked and knew he was fading away, but I'm not positive. Hey, Kevin Feige, wanna weigh in? Please? Another curious one that I'm surprised isn't used more, his ability to grow extra limbs. He might be able to do a lot, but extra limbs aren't as helpful of a skill as one might think. I don't think this has happened in the MCU, but back in a 1971 comic, Spider-Man one day woke up with 6 limbs. Eventually he was saved with an antidote made by Dr. Kirk Connors, but damn, I think it's safe to assume he didn't go to high school that day. Oh, and before I forget, at one point in the comics, he actually had fangs and even stingers coming out of his hands. Eventually he realized that it was a bit much. Too much spidery and less human, so he was like, okay, we're done. Which, smart move, dude. One lesser known ability about Loki is that the guy can freaking fly. His power of manipulation allows him to levitate, meaning that, technically speaking, he can fly. I'm not sure why he didn't pull this trick out while standing off with Thanos. Come on. Another surprising one, he has super speed abilities. As half frost giant, he has amazingly quick reflexes, thinking abilities, and agility, which means he can probably take down anybody he wants, he just doesn't want to. Ooh, almost forgot. He doesn't look like it with his lean figure, but he has super strength, just like Thor. Okay, he might not be as strong as Thor, but he's still a god and a frost giant, making him far stronger than any mortal human. As a trickster, he uses more of his intellectual powers than brute strength, so we don't get to see him lifting up a car or a building. But he can. Okay, how about I end today with a supervillain just to change things up? Did y'all know that Electro was able to control minds? Context, Maxwell Dillon was working as an electrical engineer, but when he was repairing a power line, he was struck by lightning, and that transformed him into Electro, one of Spider-Man's most dangerous villains and a member of the Sinister Six. With the ability to create and manipulate electricity, one of his hidden powers is the ability to mind control. Theoretically, since Electro can manipulate electric currents, he is able to control a person's brain by controlling their neurons. Neurons, or nerve cells, are cells in the brain that transmit and process data through electric signals. It's possible that in that attempt, Electro could fry somebody's brain, but if he focuses just right, Electro could easily be confused for a telepath. One of his favorite forms of attacks is to directly electrocute someone with electric energy blasts, but little does he know that the fight could be over without him breaking a single sweat.
First ever appearing in the back pages of the very first issue of Sensation Comics of 1942, which also contained the premiere of Wonder Woman, the original Mr. Terrific, and the Atom, Ted Grant is one of the world's best hand-to-hand fighters, particularly when it comes to boxing, being the one to train several other DC fighters, including Batman. Ted's dad, Henry Grant, had taught and trained him so well that Ted became a Wildcat in the ring. He eventually goes on to become a superhero named Wildcat. Cool, love it, simple. Wait, what do you mean that he gained 9 lives? So basically, while Ted spent a good chunk of his career technically powerless, eventually Wildcat was cursed by King Inferno and Zatara. You gotta love when curses actually are more like blessings though. Zatara's curse halted Ted's aging process and gave him an extra 9 lives, like this is a video game or something. It's a pretty neat curse to be able to pull off, and in fact it's so good it kinda makes you wonder why Zatara wouldn't just give it to himself or his loved ones. Next up, it's Hawkman, just the whole character. His origins have changed many different times over the character's comic book existence. In his original 1940 origin, he is Egyptian royalty who has been reincarnated throughout time as a variety of different heroes before eventually becoming the archaeologist Carter Hall. When he was reintroduced in 1961, he was now an alien cop from the planet Thanagar named Qatar Hole, who comes to Earth and takes on the secret identity of Carter Hall. 2 years later, we learned that these two different versions are actually multiversal variants of each other, with the alien living on Earth 1 and the original being on Earth 2. Then in 1986, the Crisis on Infinite Earths happens and all the worlds are combined into one, so these two people were now both Hawkman at different points in history, with the original operating in the 40s and the alien operating in the 80s. In 1994's Zero Hour, these two become just one person. Then in 2011, Hawkman is, and always has been, a space cop from Thanagar. And then in 2017, Carter Hall was now a pharaoh who reincarnates because the knife that he was hard deleted with in ancient Egypt was made of nth metal from a Thanagarian ship. And then finally in 2018, it's decided that he can just reincarnate not just on Earth, but on different planets as well. And all of his powers are because of that nth metal, which itself makes no sense. Ronnie Raymond was a jock in high school who was also, funnily enough, also an environmentalist. When Ronnie showed up to protest the opening of a new nuclear power plant, he met Dr. Martin Stein, a Nobel Prize winning physicist who worked there. When the Firestorm Matrix reactor malfunctioned thanks to one of Ronnie's compadres, Stein and Raymond were both caught in the radioactive aftermath and somehow found themselves fused together into Firestorm, the nuclear man. Now, the two men are a being with two minds sharing the same body, usually with Raymond taking the lead. Alongside the rather unique one man with two minds thing, Firestorm also gained the ability to transmute any non-organic matter, having complete control over molecules. With this ability, he can do many things that honestly don't make a ton of sense. While regeneration, self-sustenance, density manipulation, shapeshifting, and all that makes sense given his molecular abilities, where it starts to fall apart for me personally is being able to walk through walls, because it's not like he's making his molecules intangible. He also has nuclear powers, which feels kind of unnecessary, and there's a few more things he can do that just push the boundary just a tiny bit. He's an incredibly powerful all-around character, but I think DC did him a disservice by making him kind of able to do anything at all and explaining it away as an added benefit of the accident that made him. Or them. Or him. I'm gonna go with him. And last up today, Superman has gone through a lot of changes during his time in DC Comics. While we now know what his powers are and they rarely change except for when they get like augmented or there's some kind of solar radiation ability, when he first showed up, his powers were still being developed by DC, and he went from being strong enough to pick up a car, leaping 1/8 of a mile, outrunning an express train and being mostly bulletproof, to flying faster than light, having enhanced strength, developing super hearing, x-ray vision, telescopic vision, heat vision, and being able to withstand an atomic blast. It was when we got to the Silver Age though that writers kind of started to run out of challenges for the character. So they started to create stories where the character would develop a new, very specific power that he would have for just one issue and it would almost never be seen again. Unsurprisingly, that on its own makes no sense. But sometimes the powers themselves made even less sense. For example, some of the one-issue powers Superman was granted included, and I'm not joking, super ventriloquism, super weaving, super hypnosis, and shooting literal tiny action figure-sized doppelgang versions of himself out of his hands that would fight crime as well. This is a guy who has dragged tons of planets all connected by a chain, so I guess there's really no point in trying to explain anything about Superman and what he can and can't do. Next up, the Inhuman known as Reader has a very fitting name, as he possesses the really cool ability to make whatever he reads actually real. Which, if you think about it, should be practically impossible and is also a truly incredible power. Reader is a part of a group of Atalan Inhumans who live on Earth that call themselves the Lore. Now, because of Reader's potentially immense power, the people of the Lore tribe took his eyes out, making him unable to actually read things. On top of this, Reader has mental blocks in place that stop him from accidentally rewriting reality by reading the wrong things. Now, how does he still read with no eyes? The same way blind people do. Braille. Reader carries around Braille cards that have single words on them that allow him to do different things in combat and in given situations. For example, he has a card that says see in Braille that, when read, allows him to see through the eyes of other people. Or the back and freeze cards, which allow him to go back in time or pause time respectively. He basically has reality warping powers, but he does have a weakness in the form of only being able to use 3 words a day that gradually become less and less powerful, which is quite the nerf, but it also makes the whole this makes no sense thing even stronger. Christina Anderson has an ability that quite a few characters in comic books have. That would be the ability to shrink. Thumbelina can reduce herself down to about 1/4 of an inch tall. Now that ability is perfectly fine in my eyes. Like I said, lots of characters can do this. My problem with Thumbelina, and also some other shrinkers, is how the heck do they retain their full-size strength when they get smaller? Or, in Thumbelina's case, how does she get stronger when she shrinks? I'm sorry to try and bring physics into any debate about superheroes and their various powers, but it makes absolutely no sense in the laws of physics that someone who is smaller can be more strong than when they were the regular size. Ants, for example, if they were the size of a person, they would be insanely strong, as they are able to carry 20 times their body weight. So that's like an average human being able to carry a small SUV. But since ants are so small, that means they can carry like a leaf. Thumbelina should not be able to knock someone out when she is 1/4 of an inch tall. I'm sorry, it just shouldn't make sense. Speaking of which, Robbie Rodriguez, who goes by El Guapo, is a mutant from the Marvel Universe, but that kind of opens up a whole bunch of questions, because Robbie doesn't seem to have any powers of his own, unless you consider his symbiotic relationship with a flying skateboard a superpower. His wiki page refers to this as idiosyncratic manipulation, suggesting that Robbie actually has total control over his skateboard, but the problem with that is that his skateboard has also acted of its own accord, like when it beat him up for cheating on his girlfriend. Now, an argument could be made that perhaps that's his own subconscious beating himself up for doing the wrong thing, but that's just a me theory, and Marvel did not state this to be true at all, or really even explain his ability in any way, shape, or form. It's not telekinesis, and the board seems to have a mind of its own. You explain it to me, because I can't. Adam Narimani, or Adam X, was a genetically created hybrid of both Emperor Deken of the Shi'ar Empire and Catherine Summers from Earth. created in an attempt to introduce more genealogies to the Shi'ar Empire. Now, just as his origin is unique, so are his powers. Adam has the ability of electrokinetic hemopyrokinesis, or if you don't want to have a stroke, you can say sanguine combustion, which also sounds super cool. It basically means that he can send an electric surge through oxygenated blood, which leads to ignition of the electrolytes present in the blood, causing a person to burn from the inside out, which could result in a little subtle warming effect, which is lovely, or it could completely disintegrate a person, so there's a lot of wiggle room here. But thanks to his Shi'ar side of things, he also has enhanced strength, agility, reflexes, stamina, speed, vision, and healing. You couple all that with his awesome fighting skill and the cool cybernetic retractable claws, and he's just someone you don't want to mess with, but also, he can set fire to your blood. In our runner-up spot today, Chamber, or Jonathan Evans Starsmore, discovered his powers when a blast of psionic energy just literally burst from his torso and destroyed much of his chest and face. It turns out that Chamber is literally composed of that same psionic energy, with his body just acting as a shell for it. When his powers burst out of him, the wound was replaced by a constant glow of psionic fire, leaving him unable to speak. Instead, he can only communicate telepathically. Additionally, he doesn't eat, drink, or even breathe, as he has literally no organs. It's just energy inside of him all the time. Chamber constantly created and unleashed psionic charges of energy that could strike with volatile force, being projected as a blast from his chest, a series of guided streams that struck specific targets, or as a massive eruption striking in all directions. If he was given the time to train properly, Chamber could have potentially been one of the most powerful mutants to walk the earth, but his powers make no sense. Okay, so many Inhumans have incredibly unique and awesome powers. Only Karnak's ability isn't so much a superpower as it is a learned skill, kind of like Hawkeye. Karnak never went through the process of Terrigenesis, which would have activated his Inhuman gene and given him actual powers. Since he never went through this process, he has all the enhancements of a regular Inhuman, including super strength, speed, stamina, and durability. But unlike other Inhumans, Karnak has trained himself to be an extremely powerful martial artist, and beyond that, he developed an incredibly powerful trait of being able to sense weak points, fracture planes, and stress points in enemies, objects, plans, arguments, and anything really, including concepts. Obviously, in combat, he can use this alongside his martial skills to defeat opponents even more quickly, but the applications outside of combat are incredibly useful as well. For an example, just one example, because that's really all I need, he found a weakness in death itself and was able to bring himself back to life, which... Coming in at number 10 today is the Hulk. Now just hold on a sec before you get up in arms. Everyone knows the Hulk's ability to turn into a big old green monster and rip things apart with a strength that increases based on his anger. But what many of you may not know is that Hulk actually possesses a much more subtle ability to see astral projections and ghosts, and even interact with them if he chooses to. Hulk's astral form perception has come in handy when working with Doctor Strange as a defender, but why does Hulk even have this ability in the first place? Well, Bruce Banner subconsciously feared his father's ghost would come back to haunt him, like literally come back to haunt him. And so, the Hulk just developed this mechanism to allow him to look out for that ghost. There isn't really more to it, that's just kind of it. Hulk just developed the ability that is something usually reserved for telepaths and magic users. For the super intelligent Bruce Banner, it would make a bit more sense, but it's actually been suggested that for Bruce, the clarity of the astral forms are diminished when compared to the telepathic resistant Hulk's ability to view them. With Immortal Hulk and the connection to the One Below All, perhaps that could serve as some kind of fan explanation, but that's all we got. Number 9, Dupe. This bumpy looking lima bean is and was basically the mascot of a bunch of different mutant teams in Marvel Comics, while also low-key being one of the heaviest hitters around. Dupe is unable to learn English, and as such he speaks in a language all of his own that everyone can somehow understand. According to Captain America, the US government created him in a secret weapons project, and he was instrumental in the fall of the Soviet Union. But then, apparently, he also comes from a place called Marginalia, quote, the world between worlds and place that begins where the story ends. Which is basically to say that we don't actually know where he comes from for sure. The most surprising thing about Dupe though is his list of powers. It is long. He has possible omniscience, he's strong and durable enough to defeat Thor, he can heal from super serious wounds in seconds and resurrect himself, he has blinding speed, size alteration, energy projection, psionic fire, blasts and shields, he can perform quote, dupish magic and has the power of the funk. Oh, and Dupe's body also contains a nightmare dimension known as Dupeland, and he is able to access that by turning himself inside out. It's not just Dupe's powers that are weird, it's literally the whole package. He's weird. Number 8. Hindsight Lad. To be completely candid here, Hindsight Lad's powers are not actual powers, but he acts like they are, and that means I'm gonna talk about it. Carjan Lafroige was a nuisance before he ever became Hindsight Lad, but when he found out that his neighbor, Robbie Baldwin, was Speedball of the New Warriors, he threatened to reveal Robbie's secret identity unless Robbie let him be a part of the team. And he actually managed to prove very useful, and did have some tactical ability which eventually got him fully put on the team. He kind of became their guy in the chair, but that's because his self-given power was the power of hindsight. The power to look back at all the superhero fights that he's been a part of and analyze them, quote unquote, and now with the present hindsight, he can tell the heroes what they should have tried differently, which in his mind meant they can now go prepare for that exact same scenario if it plays out again, which in a comic book, that's probably not gonna happen. Just saying. Number 7. El Guapo. Robbie Rodriguez, who goes by El Guapo, is a mutant from the Marvel Universe, but that kind of opens up a whole bunch of questions because Robbie doesn't seem to have any real powers of his own, unless you consider his symbiotic relationship with his flying skateboard a superpower. His wiki page refers to this as idiosyncratic manipulation, suggesting that Robbie actually does have total control over his skateboard, but the problem with that statement is that his skateboard has also acted with a mind of its own, like when it beat him up for cheating on his girlfriend. Now, an argument could be made that perhaps it's his own subconsciousness beating himself up for doing the wrong thing, but that's just a me theory, and Marvel did not state this to be true or even explain his ability at all, really. It's not telekinesis, and the board seems to have a mind of its own. It's weird. I don't know what to say. Number 6. Phantom X. When I first read a comic with Phantom X in it, I did not fully understand his power, and I still don't really. So now I'm gonna try and explain something to you guys that I do not understand. Cool? Cool. So basically, Phantom X, or Charlie Cluster 7, or Weapon 13, or John Philippe, was experimented on by Weapons Plus, and was genetically grown and evolved using Sentinel technology. Thanks to this, he actually has, or had, 3 brains for independent parallel processing, nanoactive blood, and his primary nervous system is actually a detachable techno-organism called Eva. So there's some stuff to break down there. Eva can fly herself and can generate bioelectric charges to be used in attacks, with Phantom X being both telepathically and symbiotically linked to Eva. His multiple brains allow him to think like a sort of supercomputer similar to Sage, but it also gives him access to 2 extra, quote, personalities, a charmer and a super deadly mutant hunter. He can create extremely powerful illusions and enter a trance state where he can rapidly heal himself, and his self-supremacy over his own body and mind allow him to overcome pretty much anything to complete his mission, including mind control. I can't talk too much more about him because of time, but know he has enhanced senses, is a dope fighter, and does not create any kind of odor from his own body. Just look into the guy, he's really weird, but he's also really cool. Number 5. Iska the Unbeaten. Iska is thousands of years old and is the sister of Genesis, who is the wife of Apocalypse, so fun little fact for you. She is a hardened warrior who respects power and strength like the other mutants of Araco, and her powers kind of reflect that. Iska's power is tychokinesis, which is the power over luck and probability, but specifically, her power means that she cannot lose, or the better way to say it is that she always wins. This includes one-on-one contests, votes, and wagers, but also larger battles where she is a member of a team or an army. In contests of skill, her powers might give her the talents she needs to win, or she might just win through, quote, improbable circumstances. So far, it's sounding pretty good. Always winning is so good, it just sounds like ridiculous and lazy writing. because it kinda is. But it also means that in larger battles or wars, her powers weigh the probability of the two sides and literally make her defect from the losing side and join the winning side, even if the losing side was composed of those she truly cares about, meaning that even though she still technically won, she betrayed her closest friends and allies. Her power has also famously been used against her and one of her allies. When Tarn the Uncaring faced off against Magneto, the mutant Sunspot bet Iska that Tarn would win. So because she would be betting against Tarn, someone she's fought beside for thousands of years, he was actually easily wiped off the face of Mars by Magneto, who crushed his head like a cherry. Her power is really good, it's just got some really crummy loopholes sometimes. Number 4. Adam X. Adam Naramani is honestly quite a bit interesting. He was a genetically created hybrid of both Emperor Dekun of the Shi'ar Empire and Catherine Summers from Earth, created in an attempt to introduce more genealogies to the Shi'ar Empire. Now just as his origin is unique, so are his powers. Adam has the ability of electrokinetic hymopyrokinesis, or if you don't want to hurt yourself trying to say that, you can also say sanguine combustion, which sounds way cooler. It basically means that he can send an electric surge through oxygenated blood, which leads to ignition of the electrolytes present in said blood, causing a person to burn from the inside out, which could result in a little subtle warming effect, or it could completely disintegrate a person, so there's a lot of wiggle room here. Thanks to his Shi'ar side of things though, he also has enhanced strength, agility, reflexes, stamina, speed, vision, and healing. Couple all that with his awesome fighting skills and the cool cybernetic retractable claws that he has, and Extreme, which is his name, is someone you probably don't want to mess with. Number 3. Tag. I actually kinda wish I had Brian Cruz's power. It just seems like the perfect chaos creating ability, and that to me is hilarious. Tag's ability, known as the Pariah effect, allowed him to use a form of telepathy when he touched someone that caused the target to emit a psionic signal, which would make them a target for others to run away from or run towards. Whichever way people would run, they would do it while being fully aware of what they were doing, but unable to control themselves. If they were being controlled to run away, they would continue to do so until they were about 100 feet away. But if the signal caused them to run towards whoever was, quote, it, then they would dogpile on top of whoever that was. What's strange, other than everything about this, is that he could also control who was affected by the ability, but like how? He only made one person it, so how does he decide who runs away and who doesn't? He could also make whoever was it run away from themselves, which is just what? In other words, they would just run uncontrollably and in random directions, which is actually kind of hilarious. The fun thing about him is he would also always say, "You're it," which is kind of misleading because that person can't tag someone else or make them it. I don't know, it's weird, but it's really, really cool. Number 2, Cora of the Burning Heart. Can we please just get an applause for literally the coolest name ever? Cora of the Burning Heart is a mutant from Morocco where she served as an assassin and primarily used her power only to boost her own abilities in battle, thanks to the Iraqi being really stubborn, honor-bound fighters or whatever. But Cora's abilities can actually help others as well. Cora's heart is essentially an internalized combustion furnace, which generates life force energy. Thanks to that energy, she can get this really awesome looking flaming skeletal appearance, and she uses this constant energy source to give herself incredible physical capabilities, as well as boost up the powers of others around her to even greater heights. She was a member of the X-Terminators alongside Cable, and she is also part of SWORD. Also, Cora of the Burning Heart. Just wanted to say it again. Number 1. Chamber. Chamber, or Jonathan Evans Starsmore, discovered his powers when a blast of psionic energy that burst from his torso destroyed much of his chest and face. That doesn't sound good, but it turns out that Chamber is literally composed of that same psionic energy, with his body just acting as a shell for it. When his powers burst out of him, the wound was replaced by a constant glow of psionic fire, leaving him unable to speak. Instead, he can only communicate telepathically. Additionally, because he is made of energy, he does not eat, drink, or even breathe because he has no organs. Chamber constantly created and unleashed psionic charges of energy that could strike with volatile force, being projected as a blast from his chest, a series of guided streams that struck specific targets, or as a massive eruption striking in all directions. If he was given the time to train properly, Chamber could have potentially been one of the most powerful mutants to walk the earth. Also, in one story, he's is used as literally like a jet engine on a spaceship. It's really weird, but super cool. For example, we got Rainbow Girl. The Legion of Superheroes seems to just be a sticky flytrap for all the random and wacky superheroes out in the universe. Unlike a lot of others, Rainbow Girl didn't actually make it onto that team as her powers were deemed not useful enough. She just tried out, got rejected, and instead she made it onto the Legion of Substitute Heroes, which I'm assuming is the Legion that villains either don't listen to or the Legion that just puts on a movie for villains instead of fighting them. Rainbow Girl can harness the whole emotional spectrum. Red for rage, orange for green, yellow for fear, green for will, blue for hope, indigo for compassion, and violet for love. But unlike the lanterns of each of those different emotional colors, Rainbow Girl has no ring to use the power through. She can just kinda do it. The problem is she just cycles through the colors impulsively, leading to terrible mood swings. Not only was this incredibly offensive, having a female hero whose main thing is awful mood swings, but it kind of makes, no sense. There is no real explanation for why her powers are the way they are, and there's no explanation for why she has mood swings or how she even uses her powers with no lantern ring to do the stuff that the rings do. Now, Wally West is easily the fastest of all the speedsters out there. He has an almost spiritual connection to the Speed Force that allows him to do a great number of things, like traveling through time to creating electrical energy constructs. Thanks to a heart condition of all things, Wally has even been able to freeze time, which basically allows him to move at super speed without actually moving at super speed. And if you can explain to me exactly how that works, then I'll give you $1 single, because that's probably all I have. Now, the Speed Force is basically time, the representation of reality in motion, being the very cosmic force that pushes space and time forward. So how is it that people like Wally can hold chunks of it, create lightning constructs with it, absorb speed and momentum from people or things? As a concept for time, a cosmic force, it is really hard to both wrap your head around and explain the Speed Force and all the things that speedsters like Wally West and Barry Allen are able to do with it. You kinda just have to accept it for what it is. Sorry. Alec Holland was a scientist who created a restorative growth formula before being doused in the chemical by gangsters and set on fire. He jumped into a nearby swamp and was reborn as the Swamp Thing. Eventually, it was revealed that Alec Holland had actually passed away that night, and the creature that emerged from the swamp was a humanoid plant elemental creature with Alex's memories. Regardless, the Swamp Thing is basically a god. An earth elemental and avatar of the green, essentially a god of plants with unimaginable levels of superhuman strength, durability, and inability to feel pain. He can regenerate from plant life, he can move at the speed of light, alter his size drastically, shapeshift to grant himself abilities like flight and duplication, he has control over plants which allows him to teleport through plant life as well, and thanks to his connection to the green, he can even move through time, and possesses cosmic awareness, and he can even possess other humans, all from a restorative growth formula, a fire, and jumping into a swamp. Now, a whole lot of superheroes have similar origin stories, and I mean, let's be honest, how many different ways can you realistically come up with for someone to gain superpowers that actually make sense? Not a lot, I bet. Lots of superheroes have created the source of their own powers with science. Our Man was the first example of this in the DC universe. Rex Tyler created the Miraclo pill that gave him superhuman strength and durability for an hour each day. Just 1 hour. The fact that it only works for an hour is just odd on its own. Was that the limit of what he was able to do? How did he make that a trait of a pill? Why does it take exactly 60 minutes for the pill to wear off? How does it boost strength and hardness of his skin? What happens to the extra mass? Why didn't he just modify it to always work, if not by himself, then by using other people's research? Why was it physically addictive? I have questions, Our Man, and it may take more than an hour for you to answer them, so I hope that's okay. Some of our heroes' powers really only come to light or become useful in very specific situations, and some literally only appear in key events, never to be seen again. For Justice League founding member Aquaman, an example of that kind of power came during the Brightest Day crossover event which followed the awesome Blackest Night. In Blackest Night, Aquaman was one of a bunch of heroes and villains that were resurrected from the underworld to become members of the Black Lantern Corps. After their defeat, the remaining heroes heroes and villains who returned to the land of the living had to now find their purpose. Aquaman was returned with the purpose of both saving Aqualad and preventing a war between Atlantis and Zabel. Now Arthur found that since he was resurrected to serve as a member of the Black Lantern Corps, he was now able to summon undead sea life to come to his aid. Trust me when I say that it is much cooler than you might expect. I guess if you kind of suspend reality a little bit, it can sort of make sense, but is he resurrecting that sea life? Is he just controlling their lifeless bodies? When Aquaman controls fish, I thought it was like a telepathic thing, but now I'm kind of thinking that he's just forcing their little fish bodies telekinetically to do what he wants, which is creepy. Beast Boy is the comedic relief of the Teen Titans. His ability to transform into animals is perfect for jokes and for their awesome battles, but because he is a bit of a silly little guy, I feel like DC kind of decided that how he got his powers and why they are the way they are just doesn't really need a ton of explanation. Beast Boy gained his powers from what his wiki describes as, and I'm not joking, an unspecified incident. Another origin says that he gained his powers through a blood transfusion from a green monkey and gained the ability to change into any type of animal. Now, shapeshifting is a power that doesn't really make sense at all. Like, where does the extra mass come from or go to when they shapeshift? That's one that applies to all shapeshifters, but for Beast Boy, why does he only turn into animals? What keeps him from shapeshifting into humans? Now, it will be explained that his shapeshifting is a part of his connection to the mystical force known as the Red, but other characters that are connected to the Red simply use the abilities of other animals. I love Beast Boy, so whatever, but it's still kinda weird.
At number 10, he's a god. I think this is something that a decent amount of people forget. Thor is literally the god of thunder. Like, yeah, he's a demigod technically, but he's still a freaking god. And this comes with a whole bunch of associated powers, like Superman toughness, senses, strength, and the fact that he's 1,500 years old. Yeah, that's also a thing. He's normally depicted as being 1,500 and 1,800 years old, which makes me really question the ethics and morals behind Thor and Jane's love triangle thing. Like, at what age does an Asgardian become legal, or is that just like whenever their body decides to grow? Because again, they're gods. As deities, this aspect is inherent to their existence, granting Thor self-sufficiency and rendering him immune to the same necessities for aging as humans. So while Odin serves as an example of aging among gods, Thor is always looking good, so I doubt he'll get old anytime soon. If you're enjoying this video so far, please support us by giving this video a like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. At number 9 is Super Breath. Introduced and seemingly only used in Journey into Mystery number 86 from back in 1962, Thor has the ability to blow really hard. Okay, wait, let me rephrase that. He will blow you to kingdom come. No, that's even worse. There's no good way to say it. Well, what I mean is that Thor's god lungs are so powerful, he could actually cause a hurricane with an exhale. In the comic in question, a villain known as Zarko tries to shoot Thor with a pew-pew that would send him to another dimension, but to stop this from happening, Thor uses his super breath, which is described as a hurricane force, to get out of it. No idea how breath can save you from entering the 4th dimension, but hey, all bets are off with this one because it was only used once, and of course, in the comics. There will never be an explanation that makes sense. At number 8 is super speed. Thor, a deity wielding the mighty Mjolnir, possesses astonishing speeds in his arsenal. He isn't just renowned for his immense strength within the Marvel universe, but also his extraordinary swiftness, surpassing even the speed of light. This remarkable velocity enables Thor to outpace Quicksilver, a prominent speedster among the X-Men, essentially Marvel's answer to the Flash. While an exact measurement of Thor's velocity remains elusive, he has indicated that on Earth his speed is supersonic, yet when traveling in space he can circumnavigate the sun and span the universe in mere seconds, feat made possible by Mjolnir's ability to transcend time and space. Indeed, Thor's exploits include even freaking time travel. At number 7 is All Tongue. Well, this might sound like something you'd see on a Toronto guy's Tinder profile. It isn't exactly what you think. An Asgardian deity responsible for safeguarding the 9 realms, Thor's duty often requires interactions with vastly diverse races, many of which communicate in distinct languages. And although filmmakers tend to simplify matters by having everybody speak English for audience interpretation, the comic version of Thor possesses the remarkable ability to converse fluently in the language of all 9 realms. He can actually choose which language to use during a conversation. This remarkable skill is known as the All Tongue, a gift that ensures whoever communicates with him will hear his words in their native tongue, allowing for seamless understanding. So basically, Thor can talk in whatever language he wants, and everyone he's talking to is able to understand him. Like a live-in-the-moment translator that actually gets the grammar right instead of just being a literal word-for-word translation. At number 6 is Warrior's Madness. Comic books and movies stories have depicted numerous instances where heroes find themselves facing superior and overwhelming forces in battles. Tactics they employ to survive against insurmountable odds and achieve victory can be attributed to a range of factors, and among these heroes, Thor stands out as someone who's endowed with such an ability which, if harnessed, has the potential to significantly impact not only his adversaries but also all those close to him. When he's in a pinch, Thor can call upon the Warrior's Madness. The Warrior's Madness, also referred to as Sin Unpardonable, stands as Asgard's most forbidden affliction under Odin's decree. Those afflicted bear the weight of a dire penalty, with only the most solemn sacrifices capable of redemption. This malady grants Thor a tenfold surge in strength and endurance, yet perilously endangers his mental well-being. It manifests through symptoms such as berserker fury, intense migraines, erratic thoughts, savage and animalistic actions, uncontrollable behavior, and irrationality. At number 5 is earthbending. During the early 2000s, a series of intricate events led to numerous Asgardians becoming trapped within the bodies of ordinary humans. This continued until Thor emerged from his prolonged slumber, breaking the cycle of Ragnarok and establishing a new Asgard above Oklahoma. Thor's return marked a rebirth, unveiling his extraordinary power over Earth itself, elevating him to one of the mightiest Asgardian deities. Embracing his elder god lineage, Thor's abilities expanded beyond mere weather manipulation. He gained dominion over vast chasms spanning continents and trigger earthquakes. In moments requiring more than weaponry and brawn, the creation of chasms to separate Thor from his adversaries proved to be an essential strategy. At number 4 is teleportation. In 2000, Marvel introduced the Ultimate Marvel Universe as a way to refresh long-standing characters with new variations and minor reboots. On Earth 1610, many of Marvel's iconic figures underwent an updated and reimagined depictions, including Thor, who exhibits a distinct divergence. In this rendition, Thor's reliance on Mjolnir for his abilities is diminished, showcasing a more arrogant and resilient warrior. Unlike his traditional counterpart, Thor from 1610's powers are not solely derived from Mjolnir. Rather, they're channeled through the enchanted hammer, resulting in a significant reduction of his power level within the Ultimate Universe. However, this drawback is balanced by his new form ability to teleport through rune magic. Reports suggest that he can traverse vast distances, spanning cosmic expanses and bridging dimensions. Despite these unique traits, the full scope of Thor's capabilities in this universe remains a mystery. At number 3 is Anti-Force. Beyond its association with potent lightning bolts, Mjolnir possesses a versatile range of abilities. Among these, it can harness and manipulate diverse energies, unleashing multitude of formidable blasts. The Anti-Force stands as one of the most formidable, albeit used sparingly, and a weapon of last resort against adversaries who defy conventional defeat. The Anti-Force's immense destructive energies are inherently pervious, capable of obliterating entire planets. Thor can now create, shape, and manipulate anti or negative forces, which work in different ways depending on the force. Anti-gravity, for example, would repel objects instead of retract. Anti-electromagnetism would cause like charges to attract and opposite charges to repel. Anti-friction and anti-velocity would speed up objects or flow instead of resisting them. Anti-strong force would cause nuclei to explode, and the anti-weak force would cause radioactive growth instead of radioactive decay. Pretty weird. At number 2 is the Odin Force. On various occasions, Thor has been granted the mighty of Odin Force, an infusion of the cosmic and mystical energies from the realm of Asgard by his father. This divine inheritance amplifies all of his abilities, amalgamating Odin's, Vili's, V's, and his own powers, thus significantly elevating Thor's prowess. Demonstrating this augmented might, Thor managed to fracture Captain America's shield with a single blow, relocated Asgard above New York City's skies, and contained a nuclear missile's explosion. The extent of Thor's achievements while wielding this power was considered just a fraction of its potential, as per the avatar of Odin Force. As Mjolnir suffered the damage during a confrontation with Bor, Thor sought the assistance of Stephen Strange for its repair, and to mend the hammer, Strange revealed that Thor would need to invest his remaining Odin Force and permanently bind the essence with the hammer. Despite the risk, Thor willingly underwent ancient ritual performed by Dr. Strange, channeling the Odin Force back into Mjolnir and restoring its integrity. Becoming the Allfather of Asgard after the War of the Realms, Thor once again bequeathed the mighty Odin Force, with Odin's ultimate sacrifice granting him access to its full potential. At number 1 is the Celestial Chef. Jarnbjorn, a dwarven forged battle axe crafted from Asgardian steel for Runa, an original Valkyrior member, became significant as she vanished, absorbed by the headless Celestial. Stored in Asgard's arsenal, the weapon was later wielded by Thor before he possessed Mjolnir. In the 9th century, struggling to lift Mjolnir, Thor utilized Jarnbjorn as his primary tool against various earthbound adversaries such as frost giants, trolls, and dragons. During the 11th century, Thor empowered the axe with his blood to permeate celestial armor, confronting Apocalypse. However, Thor eventually lost Jarnbjorn, which was later claimed by Kang the Conqueror from Baron Mordo's tomb. The Apocalypse twins, Uriel and Aemon, took the axe from Kang and employed it to slay a celestial gardener, becoming the new Apocalypse and orchestrating a plot to incriminate Earth for its demise. The twins manipulated Scarlet Witch to save mutants while humanity faced destruction, leading to the transportation of all mutants to their Ark, leaving Earth and its inhabitants behind.
And at number 10 is Cyber. Adamantium encased arms and body, claws that inject victims with hallucinogens, mutant psychic tracking abilities, and even the ability to cast his consciousness into other bodies. Silas Burr has, or at least had, a truckload of impressive abilities and should be a huge threat, but he just kinda isn't. I'm not really sure why Cyber has been made to just kinda suck, but he really has. He was even responsible for giving Wolverine one of his most severe beatings up until that point in his very long life, and was partially responsible for not only Wolverine's training, but Dawkins as well. But in the gallery of Wolverine rogues, he just doesn't really have anything else to his name. He mainly worked as a lackey to other people, and even though he has all the advantages that he has, he doesn't really become much of an issue for his opponents. He trained Daken, but that boy takes Cyber down pretty readily. I believe at this point he is on his 4th or 5th body as the new Hornet, and he has transitioned to be a villain for Ben Reilly's Scarlet Spider. And nothing against Scarlet Spider, I like that character, but Marvel downgraded him from Wolverine to not Spider-Man.
Number 9. Starlet. Starlet is a villain that we get to meet in the series Batman White Knight Presents Harley Quinn, which I gotta say, even now I'm kind of still reflecting on this series. At first I read it, I didn't feel super impressed, but it stuck with me a lot, which I think is a testament to it. The artwork in that series is also really beautiful, and honestly I think it's worth a read just for that, but the story, a twisted sort of criminal mystery / drama, is also quite good in this 6-issue mini. Starlet is the villain of the tale, with her true identity being revealed later on. Harley joins the case to help apprehend Starlet as a consultant. Starlet is targeting old Hollywood stars and killing them in Gotham as part of her plot. I don't want to spoil the ending of this one in case you want to read it, but you have yet to do so, so I will just say this. While Starlet is revealed to have some inside information, which is a big part of what makes the villain so deadly and ruthless, Starlet's weakness lies in their capacity to think logically and overestimate their value. In other words, a classic villain weakness in my opinion, that of ego or hubris, alas. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we're talking about here and you love basically characters that are kind of off kilter but have some pros and have some cons, be sure to check out our top 10 weirdest playlist where we talk about a lot of characters that basically are that.
Number 8. Stiltman. Oh, Stiltman. No list of useless or less than impressive villains is complete without his inclusion. He is the biggest joke in Marvel's villain community and has been embarrassingly defeated by a large number of heroes, most of whom have much larger fish to fry. But his stilts? Top-notch feat of engineering. What are some uses we can think of for his stilts? I mean, outside of obviously reaching the top shelf or painting the hard to reach spots in a room, I could see this being incredibly useful for construction work or for firefighters or any kind of emergency service. Outdoors electrical work would be a breeze if you wouldn't need to use one of those big skyjack cranes. Window washing would be a big one. I mean, they could even be used for transportation. You know how much faster you would get from place to place with legs being that long? I think we can agree being able to stand at 290 feet would have a ton of helpful uses, but fighting superheroes is very clearly not one of them.
Number 7. KG Beast. KG Beast has to be one of the most embarrassing villains around in the comics, in my opinion. Despite being a supposedly trained and extremely gifted fighter and tracker, half the time or more it seems like he misses his shots in terms of completing hits tasked to him, and he almost always ends up dead. Like, not a great assassin, I'm just saying. More recently, this once again happened when he threatened the life of Barbara Gordon and came face to face with Nightwing once more in the Nightwing series. Important to note that here, KG Beast was the one to make Dick Grayson forget who he was before, causing him to become Rick Grayson. This was during an attempt on Nightwing's life following him being shot. So as you can imagine as well, KG Beast was pretty handily defeated here, especially once the Titans sort of came in to assist a bit and Nightwing's friends came in to assist. Just it wasn't a good time for KG Beast again. Nightwing lived, but for a time would have amnesia and think he was Rick, and it was a weird time, and we all like to pretend it didn't happen, but it did, so we have to acknowledge it. And not only did KG Beast fail this mission, because he was basically tasked with trying to kill Nightwing, but he also ended up left for dead in an Arctic tundra of Russia. Batman basically used his grappling gun to paralyze KG Beast. This was during his time hunting him, which caused KG Beast to break his neck. Then afterwards, despite Anatoly's begging, Batman refused to help him. He was just like, I'm just gonna leave you here. KG Beast was like, but wait a minute, don't you have to like help people? And he was like, I think if I just leave you here, I didn't kill you, just a thing that happened, you know? So bye.
Number 6. Johnny Sorrow. As someone who used to be a silent film actor before turning to a life of crime, it's almost fitting that the powers he eventually attained were all about his physical appearance. While battling the Justice Society of America, Johnny got torn apart as he was teleported to the subtle realms. Here, this incredibly terrifying eldritch being called the King of Tears reformed Sorrow with this new terrifying form that could literally cause people to pass away as soon as Sorrow removed his mask. He was intangible with his mask on, could teleport, levitate, and manipulate energy, but he still kinda ended up being a huge disappointment. Unfortunately, his main power didn't always work the way he intended. The wizard Shazam, as an example, was only turned to stone by Johnny Sorrow, and in the case of Captain Atom, he just exploded and quantum leaped through time, which is kinda just a weird alternative, but comic books got a comic book. His ability also doesn't work on people who are blind. So when Dr. Midnight faced him, nothing happened, and Midnight simply showed Johnny a recorded image of his face which paralyzed Sorrow and let the superheroes destroy him. He has come back from this somehow, but he's just never been as threatening as you might assume he could be.
Number 5. Yon-Rogg. Yon-Rogg is just one of the most ridiculous villains out there in my opinion. He is from the Kree race and as such has an enhanced physiology, but beyond that he is supposed to be a menacing military leader who at one point threatened Mar-Vell, Kree champion, and also a military leader. Yon-Rogg was a colonel in the Kree Imperial Army who is extensively trained in both armed and unarmed combat. And the Kree themselves are known for their military prowess and excellence as well as advanced tech. But for some reason, Yon-Rogg is rarely successful in his plots to defeat either Mar-Vell or later on one of his successors, Carol Danvers. Yon-Rogg for a brief time was known as Magnetron, being revealed to have survived the Psyche Magnetron explosion and gained his own powers as a result, because of course Carol also gained her powers from that, but then later we learned she was also part Kree, but anyways, moving along. At one point, Yon-Rogg tries to call home to the Kree Empire and attempts to make a deal with them, but not even they are willing to take him seriously, having seemingly forgotten who he was after all these years with him likely having been presumed dead after going MIA. Yon-Rogg call home. Home says, no, we don't want any of that. Bye.
Number 4. Paste Pot Pete. Peter Petruski developed this incredibly strong glue that could have been the key to a long, prosperous, money-filled life if he had decided to sell it, or develop it further, or heck, even be a hero with it. The glue was handy, he could have been someone, but instead this big old dingus became a criminal. But what's even better is that not only did he rob himself of a bright, non-criminal future, since he decided to call himself Paste Pot Pete, and his main shtick was frickin' glue, he became the laughingstock of all the villains. Except for maybe Stiltman. Sure, Peter did turn things around slightly when he changed his name to Trapster, but like, not really. The damage was done. His glue could be useful in so many different ways, not even just day-to-day stuff, like he could have gone into construction or art, and I'm sure he could have even found a way to get into weapons manufacturing, as he even was able to develop a weapon for firing the glue, but no, this Goomba squandered it all to become the butt end of a joke. It's a shame.
Number 3. Belasco. I mean, Belasco is supposed to be one of the most menacing guys in Marvel Comics, right? He's basically like a demon lord of hell and a former ruler of Limbo, which you know is a hellish dimension, so I don't mean an actual demon lord of hell, but like Limbo's kinda like hell. And I'll grant you that on paper, he does seem pretty scary. But then there is the fact that he also kidnapped a young mutant so he could mold her into his own weapon, and she ended up kicking his butt, so as she rightfully should. Now granted, this young mutant wasn't just anyone, it was magic. And we all know that Illyana is a straight up powerhouse, a force to be reckoned with. But the hilarious part is that Belasco is so egotistical that he thought he could just turn magic into whatever he needed her to be, using her, and in the end, he kind of created his own worst enemy by ever bringing her to Limbo to begin with. So Yeah.
And at number 2, Mr. Mxyzptlk. Now, hear me out. I need to make it clear that I am actually a big fan of Mr. Mix. He's really cool and just a blast to read, but as a villain, he's not exactly the greatest of them. He doesn't do more than be a pest to Superman, and is even a pest to Superman's villains, mainly Lex Luthor. He has benefited Superman way more than he's hindered the guy. He is kind of worthless as a villain, I'm sorry. But that doesn't change the fact that he is one of the most powerful guys around, being a reality warping 5th dimensional imp. He's just responsible with his reality warping powers because he knows the damage it could cause. But that essentially means he isn't really a huge threat. We have seen his same powers but in the hands of an actual villain when we got the Emperor Joker storyline, and that pretty much shows us exactly the kind of things Mr. Mix is actually capable of. It's a lot, but he doesn't do any of that. Instead, he just tries to give the Man of Steel a bit of a headache, which he does succeed at doing. Still, being Superman's #1 fan makes him kind of a useless villain, but I am open to being corrected in the comments.
Number 1, Sleaze. Sleaze. Wow. I mean, I think it's hilarious how much evil Sleaze could really be doing as a villain, like on like a huge scale, considering how powerful he is, and yet he chooses to basically just be like a huge creep instead, which, you know, is definitely evil in its own way, but it's still on a much smaller scale. That's interesting to me. You might know Sleaze from one of his sleaziest plots. To get back at Darkseid, he planned to force Big Barda and Superman to make a special tape. I can't say it on YouTube, but you know what I mean. He hoped to make enough money to build himself an army which he could use to then get revenge on Darkseid for banishing him. I don't even really know how that would work, because then you'd have American dollars, and like, can you use those in space? Or was he gonna make a human army? Because that probably wouldn't be too great against Darkseid. Sleaze himself, however, he's a new god, so even without capturing Big Barda or her Mega Rod, he could probably be operating much more high-level schemes, and even possibly threatening the entire Justice League. But because he's mainly just a huge creep, he usually just comes up with the weirdest, grossest plots, and fortunately is stopped at almost every corner. Thank goodness. I mean, not every corner, but almost every corner. What a gross character. Sleaze has been shown to possess powers that allow him to alter his size, make others feel emotion, especially deep compulsions of desire. He can also drain energy or powers, and can even take control of, or at least heavily influence, his enemy's mind. So yeah, he should be doing a lot more stuff, but he's Sleaze, and he was made by John Byrne, so he's just kind of a gross weirdo.